estudyante ng mga plastic bottles at iba pang recyclable materials para ibigay sa mga junk shop. Pero si Teacher Pochi, nauna na at ginawa itong challenge sa kanyang mga estudyante. Inisip ko
Nagbabala ang World Health Organization kaugnay sa maraming medical waste ngayong COVID-19 pandemic.
Isang pilot whale ang natagpuan sa isang kanal na malubha ang kondisyon. Sinubukan pa siyang i-rescue pero bigla siyang sumuka ng 5 plastic bags at namatay. Sa autopsy, may nakita pang 80 pieces ng plastic sa kanyang tiyan. Ang Thailand na isa sa pinakamalaking consumer ng plastic bags sa mundo. Hindi nalalayo ang Pilipinas. Sa isang pag-aaral, ang bansa natin ang pangatlong pinakamalaking producer ng plastic waste. Kasunod ng China at Indonesia. More studies sa UK.
Our world is truly beautiful. It's a massive, precisely tuned marvel of engineering. Cogs, pulleys, and wheels all function in conjunction. In so many ways, we rely on each other, creating a healthy, green, and blue planet that you, we, and everyone else rely on. Biodiversity is us. It is the connection that unites all living things on the planet, tying them together in an interdependent ecosystem in which all species play a part. Human activities are affecting ecosystem structure and function, as well as native biodiversity. According to the Living Planet Index, biodiversity has decreased by 52% between 1970 and 2010. Biodiversity loss has happened faster in the past 50 years than any other time in human history. It seems as though we don't think nature is worth saving. It's time to ask the big question. What is biodiversity's worth? And what is nature's worth?
First, let us discuss what is biodiversity. Biodiversity is the name we give to the variety of all life on Earth. From bacteria to baboons, from plants to people, the range of life on our planet is incredible. All living things exist within their own communities or ecosystems such as oceans, forests, ice caps, deserts, or even cities. All this put together is biodiversity. The volume of life on Earth as well as how different species interact with each other and with the physical world around them. The word biodiversity is the contraction of biological diversity. The concept is broad and complex, but that complexity is what makes Earth a perfect place for humans to live. So why do we need biodiversity? Humans rely on biodiversity to survive. We are intertwined in a big natural system, and each element supports and enables all of us to thrive. It is easy to see why humans need nature. We need fresh water, clean air, plants and animals for food. But what we need specifically is biodiversity. Around that isn't enough. We need a natural world that is complex, resilient, thriving, and full of variety. Nature needs to be able to cope with change. Different animals and plants in a habitat helps to make that place stable and sustainable. Small changes can have few effects and allowing it to keep providing us with what we need. Benefits biodiversity brings are called ecosystem services. Biodiversity keeps us all alive, but it also makes our life healthy and safe. Ecosystem services includes forests that diminish floods, coastlines that protect us from changing sea level, and wetlands that regulate pollution, and parks that ease our anxiety.
Overall, biodiversity loss can speed up extinction. More and more animals and plants are facing an uncertain future. The International Union for Conservation of Nature is a global authority on the status of the natural world. It keeps a red list of endangered species, an important indicator of the health of the world's biodiversity. Currently, More than 30,000 species are listed as threatened with extinction, which is 27% of all assessed species. We know that millions of species have already gone extinct over the long history of the planet Earth. Biodiversity rates have always ebbed and flowed. In fact, at least 99% of all the organisms that have ever lived are now extinct. Researchers agree that 5 huge mass extinction events have already happened, including the one that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. So now let us discuss the causes of biodiversity loss. Biodiversity is in trouble across the globe, and its loss can refer to local and worldwide extinctions. Species and ecosystem can be fragile, so small changes can have large consequences. The causes of biodiversity loss are complicated, but we know the human population is making the problems worse. In the short time humans have been on the planet, we have increasingly disrupted the balance of biodiversity through changing land use, overexploitation of resources, and the impact we are having on climate. We are converting natural habitats into farms, factories, roads, and cities. Cities and towns have a smoothing effect on biodiversity. Those that require a particular habitat or are intolerant of disturbance or pollution often can't survive. This is called biotic homogenization. Animals and plants that can only live in one small area of land, like unique butterflies or flowers, and it can go locally extinct if the city's conditions are unfavorable to them.
Our future rests on a biodiverse Earth, so we can no longer take it for granted. We are now in an era where humans have a huge impact on the planet's natural system. Biodiversity loss is just as catastrophic as climate change, but the solutions are linked. Stopping further damage to the planet requires big change, but we can do it if we act now, together.
So what can we do to protect our biodiversity? First is help the bees, because bees pollinate nearly 90% of plant species and they contribute to more than 35% of the world's food supply. It gives the pollinators an extra boost in your backyard by planting a variety of wildflowers and native plants to provide nectar that will bloom throughout the season. You can also build bee boxes for native bees to make their home. Second is plant local flowers, fruit, and vegetables. Research the plants and vegetables that are local to your area and grow a variety. Each plant and vegetable helps to protect biodiversity and supports the wider ecosystem of your local area. Third is protect natural habitats. Human impact on the earth can have a devastating impact on biodiversity. Small steps like keeping to walking paths and not stepping through flowers or crops can help protect what is growing there. Fourth one is take a walk. Climate change can have devastating consequences for biodiversity. Reducing your carbon footprint by only walking can help protect it. Fifth is conserve your water use. Fresh bodies of water are essential to biodiversity. Reducing the amount of water you use by having a 5-minute shower or not running the water when washing out the dishes can help protect vital wetlands. Sixth one is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Recycling lessens pollution by decreasing energy, electricity, and water consumption and the need for landfills. The seventh is support farmers. Farmers play a key role in conserving biodiversity. With the help of biotechnology and plant science, farmers can grow more food on the same amount of land. This takes the pressure off the need to convert natural habitats into farmland. Eighth one is buy local foods when you can. Buying from your local farmer at a farmer's market or through a farm stand gives you the ability to find out how your food was grown and learn what they are doing on the farm to help conserve biodiversity. Ninth is visit your local botanical garden. Botanical gardens are great for biodiversity conservation, as scientists can store, study, and grow plants in their native habitats. Visiting and donating to your local botanical garden will help them continue to protect and promote biodiversity. 10th is educate yourself and those around you. Educating people about the importance of biodiversity conservation increases public awareness of the issue. As public awareness increases, people become more involved in caring about their environment.
An organism is defined as an entity with life.
Both living things and non living things are basically made up of molecules. However, A living thing can be identified from an inanimate object by its distinctive characteristics.
An organism is made up of one or more cells.
Such molecules are termed biomolecules. Examples are proteins, nucleic acids, lipids, and carbohydrates.
These subcellular structures are contained within a cell. One of the most important subcellular components of a cell is the chromosome, which is a cellular strand of DNA.
The part of the DNA that is responsible for the physical and heritable characteristics of an organism is called a gene. Changes involving a gene may lead to mutations. As a result, novel features could arise.
While some mutations can be lethal or can cause detrimental effects,
Our new COVID-19 cases in North Texas.
And it is spreading fast.
We hear words like
Isolation,
social distancing,
the lockdown.
however, there are also certain mutations that can lead to beneficial outcomes. Mutations can drive evolution and natural selection.
The acquisition of new traits from these mutations may be beneficial to the survival of a species. For example, a strain of bacteria that initially were susceptible to antibiotics could transform and become resistant to antibiotics when they acquire new genes. In this regard, an organism is, therefore, capable of change by mutation and adaptation. Organisms can reproduce. They can give rise to another of the same kind of species.
Scientists classify organisms into three domains, and these are
Bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. In the simplest case, an organism can be a bacteria, a DNA molecule containing genetic information wrapped in a protective plasma membrane. Organisms tend to separate their information molecules from the outside environment.
where pH changes and unknown chemicals could do damage to the molecule. Archaea. The domain archaea contains bacteria-like organisms that are unrelated to bacteria.
And can perform a wide variety of functions. For instance, many archaea live in the most extreme environments on the planet, from hydrothermal vents to lakes so salty that no other life can become established. However, the archaea also exist in most normal habitats. In a eukaryote, or an organism that has a membrane-bound nucleus and organelles, the DNA is contained in the nucleus, and the highly specialized organelles complete the various functions of the cell.
Some eukaryotes become highly complex multi-celled organisms. Virus. Some scientists even consider viruses to be organisms.
Replicating information molecules usually protected by a protein shell, the virus then uses the mechanisms of a cell it infects to replicate itself.
The Philippines is considered as one of the world megadiverse country with almost 75% of world biodiversity found in our country.
As a megadiverse country, the Philippines is recognized with its rich biodiversity. It has the most diverse life forms on a per unit area. Its biodiversity, composed of various flora and fauna, provides resources to meet basic needs for human survival, promotes economic development, and offers environmental services. However, the unsustainable use and management of the country's biodiversity may lead to its destruction. The country has been tagged as one of the world's biodiversity hotspot and a top priority in terms of conservation. The country has faced great challenges in protecting, conserving, and developing its biodiversity. In fact, there has been continued destruction of the country's resources and increase in the number of endangered plants and animal species. reaching a total more than 700 threatened species. These include the Philippine eagle, Philippine freshwater crocodile, tamaraw, yakal, and waling-waling, and among others.
Biodiversity is more than just the number of unique flora and fauna species found in a country.
It refers to the variety of life on Earth. It includes all organisms, species, and populations. The genetic variation among these and their complex assemblage of communities and ecosystems. It is described as the most complex and very vital feature of Earth.
This is because humanity relies so much on the resources and services offered by biodiversity, such as food, medicines, wood products, and ornamental plants.
Moreover, the world benefits from ecosystem services such as water provision, soil protection, nutrient storage, and recycling, pollution breakdown, ecotourism, carbon offset, flood prevention, fishery, and crop production. Nevertheless, these resources and services may not last forever, especially if their utilization and management are not sustainable. Along with the decline is the lessening of the benefit mentioned, thus, the need for biodiversity protection and conservation from threats such as overexploitation, habitat loss, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species, and among others.
Despite the new discoveries, the country is tagged as one of the world's biodiversity hotspot and top global conservation area.
Philippine plant and wildlife species are experiencing alarming rate of destruction brought about by habitat loss, human activities, and climate change.
Primary threat considered is the continuous destruction of ecosystem and habitat
that support and provide shelter the country's biodiversity. The Philippines has already lost almost 93% of its original forest cover since 1990s. Similarly, the marine biodiversity and inland water biodiversity is deteriorating, which is evident in the decreasing quality of water and fish in Laguna de Bay, the Philippines' largest lake. And then, 53% of coral reef cover was already in poor condition.
Habitat loss, one of the reasons for deteriorating biodiversity,
can be attributed to several factors as identified in the Philippine Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. These include forest degradation, unsustainable mineral extraction, and human activities and practices. Rampant forest degradation is associated with the indiscriminate logging and deforestation as well as conflicting land use. The growing human population in the country induces conversion of forest area to either residential or agricultural land. There seems to be weak integration of biodiversity concerns in the landscape planning of the country. Meanwhile, for the marine and inland water biodiversity, the major threats are pollution and fishing operation.
So biodiversity extremely important to maintain the ecological system. Most noteworthy, many species of plants and animals are dependent on each other. Therefore, if one of them gets extinct, the others will start getting endangered.
Now that we know that biodiversity is home to many species and our life support system, now let's talk about a way to protect them. Biodiversity has faced a lot of crises due to human activity, development, urbanization, pollution, and disease, and they're all creating a havoc in the tree of life. Today, species are going extinct at a faster rate than the mass extinction of dinosaurs. To stem this crisis, we must protect where biodiversity lives. But certain species are not distributed evenly around the planet, so scientists have found a way to protect these species, and they are called biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots make up less than 3% of the Earth's land surface, and they refer to regions that are high in life but has a high risk for destruction. For one region to classify as biodiversity hotspot, first it must have 1,500 vascular plants that are considered endemic, or it cannot be found anywhere else on the planet. Second, its original vegetation should be less than 30%, or it means that it is threatened. Biodiversity underpins all life on Earth, and these hotspots are critical to human survival. These hotspots are one of the most richest and important ecosystems around the world, and there are populations who directly rely on them. That is why we must protect and support them before it's too late.
After hearing all of the information regarding biodiversity, we can see that it is our responsibility as humans to conserve our biological resources. Plants and animals rely on each other for survival. The destruction of one would impact the life of the other. Conserving biodiversity will prevent these species from becoming extinct and maintain a balance in nature. We can see that many species and plants are on the verge of extinction. They become extinct after a certain amount of time. Remember the bird from the movie Rio? That bird is Spix macaw, one of the rarest birds in the world that can only be found in Brazil. Fortunately, it was declared extinct in the wild in 2019. Even the passenger plant animal, cheetah, could not outrun the threats of extinction. Scientists estimate that fewer than 8,000 African cheetahs live in the wild today, and fewer than 50 Asian cheetahs are left worldwide. These data reflect on overall decline of about 50% in the last 4 decades. It has been observed that with rapid growth in industrialization, climate change, and other natural reasons, extinctions have become the new normal. Environmentalists recommend various ex situ and in situ biodiversity conservation methods to limit any more extinctions in biodiversity. In situ conservation is also known as on-site conservation because species are conserved in their natural habitats by creating protected areas such as natural parks, sanctuaries, and biosphere reserves. In situ conservation in the protected areas began in the Philippines in 1932 with the formation of the National Park System. According to the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, there are 60 national parks and 8 game refuges and bird sanctuaries were established under the system. On the other hand, ex situ conservation is called off-site conservation. In this type of conservation, the threatened animals and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in the special area or location where they can be protected and given special care. Examples include zoological parks, botanical gardens, and wildlife safari parks. These two conservation methods are vital in preserving the quality and purity of the environment and maintaining a balance in nature. So, let's appreciate and support in situ and ex situ conservation. Let's protect our biodiversity. Oh, organisms are dependent on the environment that they are living in. However, as the world progresses, calamities and global warming is also progressing. All of this root cause is from cold deforestation. Forests are devastated throughout the history and in modern times to make room for agriculture, animal grazing, and for wood to use for energy, manufacture, and infrastructure. Based on National Geographic Society, deforestation affects North America by making its forested land from 80% to 34%. Some of causes of this are mining, illegal logging, forest fires, and agricultural activities.
Agricultural activities are one of the significant factors affecting deforestation. According to FAO, agriculture leads to around 80% of deforestation.
Due to the overgrowing demand for food products, a huge amount of trees are felled to grow crops, and 30% of agricultural costs deforestation is because of subsistence agriculture.
Apart from this, wood-based industries like paper, matchsticks, furniture, and etc. also need a substantial amount of food supply. Wood is used as fuel both directly and indirectly. Oil and coal mining requires a considerable amount of forest land. Apart from this, Roads and highways have to be built to make way for trucks and other equipments.
The waste that comes out from the mining pollutes the environment and affects the nearby species.
Another valid example would be forest bases. Hundreds of trees are lost each year due to forest fires in various portions of the world. It happens due to extreme warm summers and milder winters.
Fires, whether caused by man or nature, results in a massive loss of forest cover. These causes result to a massive effect like flooding, loss of habitat, and increase of greenhouse gases. Here in the Philippines, some of the latest deforestation situations happened on Quirino Highway in Quezon City for the construction of MRT-7. In Quirino Highway, there are a total of 1,858 trees that have to be taken down to permit the construction of MRT-7.
Halos 2,000 puno raw ang posibleng putulin para magbigay daan sa itatayong MRT-7. Ang mungkahi tuloy ng isang grupo, iilipat na lang ang ruta ng MRT-7.
The trees cover a 23.17 kilometers road from Quirino Highway near SM North EDSA up to San Jose del Monte, Bulacan. And until now, the construction is ongoing, but the lives of those fallen trees are forever ended.
Overall, deforestation not only cuts down a huge sum of trees but also the lives of many organisms and their ecosystem. As it continues, it only helps the world to become warmer and inhabitable. How long before this issue will be seriously taken? Until all the trees are already massacred, or until a new disease or virus will cause a pandemic?
The COVID-19 epidemic had an impact on the environment globally, putting a strain on the economy and many aspects of human society. The consequences of COVID-19 are unavoidable, as the lockdown of social and economic activity reduces human pressures on the natural ecosystem. Both the physical and social environments are being affected by the COVID-19 epidemic. Pandemics are large-scale epidemics of infectious illnesses that inflict major economic, social, and environmental damage while increasing morbidity and mortality across a huge geographic area. According to World Health Organization 2021, over 108.2 million individuals have died as a result of COVID-19, with over 2.3 people still missing. Several major diseases and pandemics such as the Spanish flu, SARS, Hong Kong flu, and Ebola have already caused widespread economic disruption and biodiversity conservation across and around the globe. Globalization, urbanization, land use changes, and increased biodiversity exploitation have all contributed to the recent rise in pandemic. As the current epidemic grows in tandem with global human population development, the beneficial and negative effects of COVID-19 on biodiversity resources are predictable. As a result, the unreasonable demand created a challenge to biodiversity and environmental conservation and management. The positive and negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic on biodiversity conservation were addressed in this research, as well as the implications of government's temporary short-term and long-term actions during the pandemic. But what are the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on biodiversity? At local, regional, and global levels, the COVID-19 epidemic impacted practically all areas, including biodiversity conservation. It has a variety of consequences on biodiversity conservation, both positive and negative, but the negative impact dominated the positive ones. COVID-19, like earlier illness outbreaks, caused a total lockdown, making it impossible to manage protected areas and carry out conservation programs. Now let us proceed to the positive impacts of the pandemic on biodiversity conservation. First is the reduced atmospheric pollution. Since the start of the COVID-19 epidemic, pollution has decreased as air quality and the environment have improved as a result of factories and transportation shutting down. Next is to reduce human pressure on wildlife. The exploitation of animal resources may decrease since workers from protected areas are expected to conduct anti-poaching patrols, Vulnerable species are always protected. The COVID-19 lockdown makes it impossible for poachers to travel a considerable way to hunt in the park, and loggers to enter and exit the protected areas, limiting the amount of disturbance in the protected areas. Now let us move on to the negative impacts of pandemic on biodiversity. First is the loss of skilled personnel and funds. Pandemic have enormous financial implications for both the government and conservation organizations. In developing countries with insufficient conservation capability, the loss of highly qualified staff is devastating. Next is the reduced revenue and staff strength. There is currently little evidence on the COVID-19's impact on tourism profits in various nations. The dynamics of tourism earnings can be better explained by the fluctuation of global tourist numbers. Moving on to human and resource conflict. The impact of the lockdown and other pandemic-related causes can lead to disputes and natural resource devastation. Conflicts may emerge, for example, when local people's behavior changes as a result of poor economic conditions. Next is increase in local exploitation. As many plants and animals are abused, the physical environment is also exploited. Many wild animals species have been killed by locals for consumption during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Pandemics have also sparked fears among vulnerable households in nations with diverse ecosystems, leading to land clearance, illegal logging, and mining. Moving on to lack of research, assessment, and monitoring on biodiversity. The inability to conduct research and discover changes in biological diversity aspects through monitoring programs in a protected environment accelerates loss rates. Many wildlife and biodiversity conservation research, internships, and industry training programs have been affected.
But there is a path to progress. Although catastrophic, the ongoing global crisis is not unique in its magnitude, reach, and resultant cost to humanity. For decades now, ecologists have warned about climate change, the unprecedented rate of extinction of its species, and subsequent social and economic disenfranchisement of millions of poor people in developing biodiversity-rich countries. For example, weather-related disasters displaced more than 16 million in 2018 in the developing world, and by 2050, disrupted weather will affect 200 million people. Hopefully, this pandemic has brought realizations regarding the connections among the human and the non-human components of the planet, the grave consequences of causing an imbalance in natural processes shaped our millennia, and the unpreparedness of the humanity surrounding such catastrophes.
The concerted and urgent global response to COVID-19 should pave the way for similar responses to global ecological crisis.
The rapid and visible changes in environmental variables within a few weeks of the lockdown were surprising even for experts, which should create an optimistic attitude toward biodiversity conservation. The pandemic has shown us that seemingly extreme solutions and their implementation, such as mandatory lockdown of human activities for a specific duration every year, may restore the planetary environment, even if temporarily. If nothing else, such temporary solutions will delay the tipping points of future environmental crises. The scientific community will need to lead from the front in creating solutions, and in steering the socio-political will require to implement these solutions for a more long-lasting process of environmental conservation. In the absence of such realization, the environment and biodiversity conservation may take an even further backseat in the national and international agenda in the post-COVID-19 world.
Biodiversity is essential for the survival of human populations all over the world.
We rely on it for long-term food production, clean air and water, medicine, and shelter.
It's no wonder the ecosystem degradation puts our most basic needs under jeopardy.
This is particularly true of biodiversity hotspots, which are home to some of the world's most diverse species and provide vital life support services to the people who live in and around them.
Furthermore, biodiversity is deeply embedded in human societies and essential to our understanding of the world.
Biodiversity enriches our life on a global scale with economic, cultural, recreational, religious, and aesthetic value.
All through history, it has been commemorated in art, music, and literature.
Biodiversity is an issue that affects everyone, and therefore, everyone should be aware of their effect on biodiversity.
As biodiversity decreases on Earth, so do the chances of human survival.
Therefore, it is important to educate people on living in equilibrium with the environment.
It is also important to make sure that the government is making laws that will ensure biodiversity for the future and not focus on short-sighted economics.
If humans become extinct, it will likely be a result of their own action or lack of action. Hopefully, humans will realize this before it is too late.
For our own benefit and the benefit of future generations, we want to live in a world where people are well informed enough to participate in environmental conservation.
We advocate the exchange of knowledge, sustainable means of subsistence, collaborative efforts for the protection of the environment and people's well-being, and observance of human rights.
We should preserve every scrap of biodiversity as priceless while we learn to use it and come to understand what it means to humanity.